Namaskar, Nilesh with another session of Shraddha and Pradnya. This would be session number 38 in this Shraddha and Pradnya series. Just to recap, we have gone through Mahabharata planetary evidence for three planets: Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. And in that context, if there were some additional references related to other planets, such as Mercury and Venus, or planets that are not visible to the naked eye, such as Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, or Graha, such as Sun and Moon. Now, in Indian astronomy, and also actually the world astronomy too, most of it was derived from India, not always 1:1 correspondence. By the time people from India migrated to these different parts of the world, and they took varied level of astronomy with them. A good example would be someone like me or many others coming from, say, India to America. We, not just astronomy, but as it relates to the Hindu tradition, as it relates to festival, as it relates to other celebrations, we bring a varying level of information, knowledge with us. And to an extent, we miss a lot, right? The way it might be done originally. That is exactly what happened to Indian astronomy as it came to Sumeria, Mesopotamia, Babylonia. Some of the things of Indian astronomy were preserved, but many others were not. And as it traveled further west to, say, Greece and Egypt, it lost many of its very refined features. Also, it could be that many other astronomy traditions might have had influence on likes of Egyptian tradition or Greek tradition, and that could be the reason why some of the very ingenious features of Indian astronomy were lost in these other world astronomies, I can say. The reason I mention this is even the Western astronomy in that sense considers sun and moon as planets, okay? And Indian astronomy considers them as a graha, just like anything else. The graha is something that grasps, planet is something that wanders, okay, based on the original meaning of that word in, say, Greek language, or graha in a Indian language, Sanskrit. Okay, so the three graha, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars, the planetary descriptions of these three planets individually and together, but especially together, are sufficient. Just this planetary trio, okay, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, are sufficient. If you take every single reference for these planets from the Mahabharata text, and how amazing and beautiful is this? And if you don't have any other reference whatsoever, for a minute, forget Bhishma Nirvana, the impressive evidence, forget Arundhati Vasishta, forget additional references to standalone references, I mean, to Mercury, to Venus. Guess what? These references for these three planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars, are sufficient to bring anyone with a very basic to a moderate level of astronomy understanding to 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharata war. And to convince that person that no other year other than 5561 BCE can qualify just on this evidence. So I thought I will take a break, and it's for a reason. break in the sense, break from astronomy evidence. We will come back and resume with Mercury and Venus evidence, then moon and sun. All right. And then we will look at lunar evidence in terms of lunar months, lunar tithi, lunar nakshatra, as it relates to some of the events of Mahabharata. Then we are, of course, going to look at the Arundhati Vashishta. But I'm waiting so that all the trolls have their time to talk everything they want to talk about Arundhati Vashishta, so that we can do a Purva Paksha in one place. In fact, I'll start with Uttar Paksha, essentially taking away the need for a Purva Paksha. But we will do Purva Paksha not of the recent trolls, but we will do Purva Paksha of, say, about last 400 years of 400 years, all the great Mahabharata researchers who have contributed towards comprehending the exact timing of Mahabharata war. So I thought I'll take this break and introduce some evidence which is non-astronomy in nature. Now, of course, I am doing that through another series, and I would encourage all of you, if you are following the Shraddha and Prajna series but have not followed Dr. No Shorts, please do that. But as I started trying to push anything that is non-astronomy to Dr. No Shorts, I realized in some cases, actually in many cases, it is impossible to give or to do a justice to this subject in that format, trying to keep it below 15 to 20 minutes. So that's why something that I am doing this for a while there in that other series, possibly 10 plus episodes dedicated to this one very specific subjects related to Mahabharata dating Krishna's Dwarka and flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka 36 years after the Mahabharata war, and therefore in 5525 BCE. I thought I'll take it here in this Shraddha and Prajna series. Okay, we have got a fascinating evidence. For other parts, do watch this Dr. No Shorts series. Just summary of that so far that is been covered there in the Dr. No Shorts series is this. There we began with Black Sea formation evidence, okay, 9 different scientific parameters leading to 5525 BCE. Now, keep in mind, 5525 BCE is the prediction, is my prediction, my assertion for the year for Krishna's Dwarka being flooded, destroyed by sudden sea level rise, gushing sea waters into the city of Dwarka. How did I arrive at that? I arrived based on the internal Mahabharata evidence, astronomy evidence, that 300 plus that led to 5561 BC as the year of Mahabharata war. Well, just now we talked about evidence of 3 planets, 3 graha, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. And that itself is going to take us to 5561 BCE. When I say takes us means what? It has taken us. It's for people who are not aware, it's for them to comprehend that. But there is much more evidence. Arundhati Vasishta takes you to the same time bracket. Bhishma Nirvana evidence takes you to the same time bracket. Genealogy evidence, the what you call Vangshavali, that also takes you to that same time bracket. And all the 300 plus different astronomy pieces of evidence also support that. Now, if you take additional reference from Mahabharata text that Krishna's Dwarka was flooded and destroyed 36 years after the Mahabharata war, well, that's how we come to this prediction for flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka in 5525 BC. So 5561 BC, right? Go further in time by 36 years, which is what? Additional 36 years. You subtract that because it's a before Common Era timeline. And we get 5525 BC. So that's a prediction. Against that predictions, we are looking at the terrestrial archaeology evidence from around the world. That archaeology evidence comes in the form of what? In the form of oceanography, sea level rise, the sand formation, the delta formations at the mouth of the rivers when they meet the sea, pit formations, seismology evidence, okay? It comes in various forms, okay? Suddenly disappearance of certain islands and so on and so forth. So we started with Black Sea formation, a sudden formation of a sea, okay, because of the sudden sea level rise and the water gushing into the areas where it could not go before. 9 different scientific empirical parameters. Then we looked at 6 or 7 different locations in the Caribbean, the West Indies, where there was a sudden sea level rise of 6.5 meters plus, okay, in 5525 BCE. We looked at the same scenario, a sudden sea level rise, a pulse, okay, at Great Barrier Reef, again in 5525 BCE. And then no more sea level rise, okay, after that time. We looked at Dogger Bank disappearing, okay, in 5525 BCE. The main evidence doesn't actually, just prima facie, does not give you a corroborative evidence for 5525 BCE. But the reason I covered that is that's the first evidence. Somebody brought it to my attention going back 10 plus years in the context of flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka, okay? And that person being a marine geologist, he understood why that supports. I understand it now, but I don't think still I can easily explain it because it involves a lot more than just the sea level rise. You have to take into account the land subsidence, but it's interesting. That was the first piece of evidence. And even that evidence actually gives you that insights that is required into land subsidence or subsidence. And why is that important? And we are going to see that today in our today's study. We also looked at the same effect of land subsidence when we studied evidence for Krishna's Dwarka flooding from as far as United States, Mississippi River, okay? I think that was in the Dr. No Shots. But we will see what is the benefit of sometime adding additional data from other sources to a specific study we might be doing, and also the benefit of removing certain additional data, okay? This is the process of sensitivity analysis, okay? All right, so that's the main now, the northeast corner of United States. Now we looked at another evidence from the Red River. Again, this is a delta formation into what was known rather in ancient times at Kingdom of Champa. In modern day, we call it Vietnam. And in that area of Sea of Champa, which is now called Sea of China or the Southern China Sea, into this Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam, we looked at, again, very consistent evidence, sudden sea level rise in 5525 BCE, followed by some additional rise for some time. And this is going to be a constant theme. And then actually the sea level was coming down. This all evidence provides not only a decisive support, decisive corroboration, validation for Krishna's Dwarka being flooded and destroyed in 5525 BC. But guess what? This all evidence, most of it, almost all of it, also decisively falsify anyone claiming Krishna's Dwarka being flooded and destroyed by sea level rise anytime after 3500 BC. And that's where practically every other Mahabharata dating researcher is. So you will see that they will not talk about it. They will not talk about flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka. Those few who will talk about it because they have no option left. And why they have no option left? Because in a very careless fashion, they have already opened their mouth and said all kinds of stupid things about flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka for the time period post 3500 BC. Okay. Quick note on when I use the words such as stupid and whatnot, people feel anxious. Some people say, why do you use such crude words? Well, sometimes translated in English, it may feel like a crude word, but not always. Even in Indian languages, you'll find, you say, I don't know what's the word, murkha, right? The word is murkha. And that also can appear offensive. But when we talk of a factual evidence, when we talk of scientific evidence, when we talk of empirical evidence, understand that this is not directed at a person, but it is directed at their action. As Nyaya Darshana says, pravartano lakshana dosha. It is through their actions their errors are known. It is through their actions the errors are known. And uh, becoming aware of errors, doesn't matter whose error, my errors or the errors of other Mahabharata researchers, is a good thing, because that's how we make progress. As Professor Wheeler said, our problem, our challenge is to make errors as fast, mistakes as fast as we can. Because if we identify the error, then we can learn from it and actually know a lot more. In the error, there is a recognition of the accurate answer. In the error, there is a recognition of the truth. In the ajnan, there is a recognition of a jnana, in that fashion. And if you look at our great saints, okay, sadhus, swamis, take Ramdas Swami, for example, how factual, how crisp and clear he is. For example, he has given a long list of murkha lakshana, and then he has given a long list of learned fools, okay, padata murkha. But just to give you an example, in the murkha lakshana, which so beautifully, unfortunately, but so beautifully applies to majority of the Mahabharata dating researchers, majority of the Ramayana dating researchers, majority of the Veda dating researchers. And I'm just referring majority of the Sushruta dating researchers. I'm just taking these areas because that's where I have done research. I'm very confident it possibly applies to other areas also. But for example, Ramdas Swami, in giving the Guru of great Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, in just giving a list of, I'm just going to quote one Lakshana, which is relevant to this, relevant to how people, these trolls, try to critique. They criticize, which is fine. I don't care whether they critique or criticize. I'm going to make use of their stupidity in educating myself, learning more, finding more, and educating whoever wants to listen to me. But back to Ramdas Swami. So in explaining Murkha Lakshana, one thing he says, which is very relevant to this space here, is dating of Mahabharata, dating of Ramayana, dating of Rigveda, dating of Sushruta, and connecting the dots together. It's a Akshare Galu, it's in Marathi, Dasabodh, Akshare Galuni Vachi, Kate Ghali Padarichi, Niga Nakari Pustakachi, To Yeka Murkha. What do? When these trolls take a clip from my presentation, or will take some clip from something that I might have written in, say, a Facebook or Twitter or an email, and by removing the context will say something, try to provoke some extremely naive individuals, okay, within our dharma. Now they don't succeed, but they definitely end up wasting time. Like some people will say, oh, why is this guy saying this? I said, well, go study that person. You will learn a lot. Okay, why are you asking me what he's writing or she's writing? This is that akshare galuni vachi. Okay, deliberately they will not present the whole picture. Deliberately they will avoid. They do that with the Mahabharata evidence. They do that with the Valmiki Ramayana evidence. They take this evidence in a selective fashion. Akshare galuni vachi, kate ghali padarichi. Something that doesn't exist in the Mahabharata, something that doesn't exist in what I have said, what I have written. They will say as if I have said it. Kate ghali padarichi, nigana kari pustakachi. They don't know the respect that needs to be given to somebody's work, original work, or to our great texts such as Mahabharata, Ramayana. They, just like many leftist folks do, out of habit, sheer habit, carelessness, or idiocy. For example, they will quote something from, say, Valmiki Ramayana and try to use this as an example, as an illustration towards how the Indian society of 14,000 years ago is like oppressive, patriarchal, and so on. So patriarchy, patriarchal, so on and so forth. And when I tell them, and I hold discussions with them all the time. When I tell them, okay, so for a minute, let's accept that there is this instance of Bhagwan Ram punishing a Shudra, or Bhagwan Ram sending Sita to the forest, okay, or Sita scolding Lakshman, and so on. Well, these are the human dynamics that happens every day. They are given there to us so that we can learn from it. But I don't expect a left brain to understand any of it. So that's fine. But I said, since you quote, so you consider this as an authoritative source for a Hindu civilization, for an Indian civilization, you cannot selectively take it. So because if you read Mahabharata and if you take the modern science, you are going to understand that, sorry, if you read, say, Ramayana, and then you take modern science and try to corroborate the evidence, it's going to take you to 14,000 years ago. So accept that there was this great civilization, Hindu civilization, Vedic civilization 14,000 years ago, which means they would be forced to get rid of much of their dogma. Actually, their existence would be in, I mean, their so-called intellectual existence will be become problematic. That's why they don't want to do it. That is also true with these trolls. Okay, so just as an example. Okay, Pumpuhar, phenomenal evidence. Okay, again, I'll not go through the detail. I'll encourage you to go watch that. Beautifully matches with 5525 BCE. Barrow Island on the west coast of Australia. Again, beautiful evidence matching 5525 BCE. And that consistency of water level going up slightly after that, but then it's coming down, all the way to our times. So it's like what they say, two birds in one stone. All of this evidence that I'm sharing and spending so much time is because on the one hand, it decisively establishes 5525 BC as the year for Krishna's Dwarka's flooding and destruction. And the same evidence decisively falsifies any claim for the flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka, and therefore also Mahabharata war anytime after 3500 BCE, which is what basically rest of the all close to 100% of the alternate claims for the year of Mahabharata war. That is the power of this archaeology evidence. Again, this is a good example for those folks, again, out of naivety, out of ignorance, out of laziness, will say, where is the archaeology evidence for the Mahabharata war in 5561 BCE? Well, this is the archaeology evidence, guys. It doesn't get any better than that. In comparison to this evidence, you finding some pot and a pan, and of course, we'll find Rakhi Gadi and places, people have found these pots and pans. And what is this place in Baluchistan? Mehergarh, where the storage for grains and rice and whatever the different crops, going back to 5,000 exactly Mahabharata times and beyond, 7,000 BC and 9,000 BC and so on and so forth. But this evidence is not to be even compared for the quality with just somebody finding pots and pans and just trying to date them, and then suddenly jumping and saying, oh yeah, we found Mahabharata. Why? Because Mahabharata folks use pots and pans and you don't. And are you saying that nobody in between use pots and pans? That's what I mean by naivety, carelessness, casualness, ignorance, and also stupidity, that murkhata. So that murkhata is not to be taken in an offensive way, but actually it should wake up somebody and saying, don't do this nonsense again. Okay, learn whatever is required and then start studying this. Because even in the buddhi, somebody may have a buddhi and lots of it. But then Krishna asks us to ask the question, what kind of buddhi is it? Is it a sattvic buddhi, rajasic buddhi, tamasic buddhi? If it's a tamasic buddhi, we have got a bigger problem. Having lots of it is not useful. Adharmam dharmam itiya manyate tamasavruta sarvarthan viparitamsha buddhisa partha tamasi. Like Warren Buffett talks about it. Like, if you are hiring someone, and the three qualities that he would look for in that individual, or he looks for, is what? The integrity, okay? Integrity, intellect, and enthusiasm. Think of energy, but integrity, intellect, enthusiasm. And then he says, if somebody doesn't have the first one, There is no point that person having, no point hiring, number one, but no point that person being very intelligent and enthusiasm. Rather, you want that person to be dumb and lazy, because if the integrity is not there, they are going to create a chaos. That's what these trolls are doing. But I like it because that's a manthan. Otherwise, many people will say, Nilesh, so yeah, you did that and whatever, we don't understand it, but great. So why are you talking about it? These people give me a good reason to talk about it. Okay, all right. So Pumpuhar is very fascinating evidence. Then Dwarka itself, okay, the Arabian Sea evidence. This is based on 6-7 different studies, possibly 30 different studies. The paper was published in around 2000 or so, like 20 years ago. Sudden sea level rise of 15 meters at right in the middle of 6 millennium BC, 5525 BC. Okay, and then sudden and further rise of additional 8 meters, and then staying stable there until 2000 BC and coming down. We'll also looked at Achebanda, phenomenal evidence from the cave there, amazing evidence. Okay, so it takes away that local event arguments, tsunami arguments, and so on and so forth. Okay, what else? Oh, the river Mississippi. Now, this was all covered in the Dr. No Shorts series. Again, river Mississippi, phenomenal evidence with corrections made based on the land subsidence and how actually that allows us to know more. Okay, so today we are going to look at some additional evidence. We are going to look at the oceanography evidence from Netherlands for flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka in 5525 BCE. This is from the area called Wadden Sea. Okay, we will just use the word American way, like a Wadden Sea. But you know, if you have been to Netherlands and have talked to the locals, you would know they will say Wadden G, and sometimes you wonder what are they referring to. But we will just call it Wadden Sea. That area there, you know, this is that North Sea. This whole area is called North Sea. So think of the southeast corner, like, you know, so, along the Netherlands area as the Wadden Sea, and evidence coming from that. The what attracted me to this evidence is when I was looking at Dogger Bank evidence, and I, unfortunately, guys, forgive me, there are a number of you great researchers who bring this kind of evidence to my attention, and I forget exactly who made me aware of that evidence. Like, I really don't recall right now who made me aware of the Dogger Bank evidence, but somebody did, and I picked it up on that and read about it. So the Dogger Bank is what? Somewhere in this area. Okay, so not far from here. But when I looked at that evidence, I did not get, from the papers I read or whatever I read, I did not get a sea level rise data. The only the information that the Dogger Bank was gone, disappeared in 5525 BC. So I found this evidence very attractive because right in that area, so the Dogger Bank is, we are looking at this area here, and not far from it, we have now evidence of sea level rise. This is possibly, yeah, there you go, 2018, the paper from 2018, not that long ago, about 4 years ago. Okay, so it was not there when I was looking for before evidence. Now, once this paper comes up, actually, if you look at the cross references, my God, I mean, there is so much data that therefore I keep on saying at some point I'm going to stop, guys, you know, and if you don't, after this, if you don't understand it, if somebody still is kind of thinking, well, I'm not so sure. Well, yeah, you are not so sure, and your samshaya is never going to go away because you lack the basic infrastructure, basic foundation of scientific acumen, logical reasoning, empirical science, objective testing, and the minimum level of intellect that is required. So what we are seeing here are actually 6 different curves or 6 different places, data points from 6 different places. Okay, and notice it's from that same area, by the way, just like you see these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Okay, so same area, more or less same area, and you see the variation. It's very important that you understand this. And why is that? Why is this variation even from this same region? And therefore, you have to look at the data set holistically and not like say, oh, but this line, just if I take number 6, okay, the Northwest Germany, oh, that one kind of says, yeah, it's not at the 7,500. By the way, it does show at 7,500, this peak here. But I'm just saying, or maybe you will take this number 1, Belgium, and you'll say, well, the peak appears to be like before 8,000 present, so before 6,000 BCE. So why are you saying 5525? Well, just look at it. That's a sudden pulse. It continues without even change of a slope and brings you right to 5525 BCE. But the point is, you are going to see this variation because of the various factors we have discussed. So we have to learn to analyze each single curve depending on how much deep you want to go. But then you also need to build the ability, the Tantra Yukti, okay, to bring it all together and make a global conclusion. Okay, so I'll point the 5525 BC. So now what is the significance of this? This is actual data that you're seeing. Against that, I am plotting the prediction. I'm plotting my prediction that I'm asserting for Krishna's Dwarka being destroyed in 5525 BC. And how does it compare against the actual data? It compares very beautifully. Amazing. But we are going to actually refine this data further and look at how much more we can actually gain from this. Through this, I also want to give you an idea, the amount of efforts that go into, of course, these people collecting the data and writing the papers, they have nothing to do with the Mahabharata per se. But a Mahabharata researcher like myself, when I'm looking at this data, it is not a, what they say, plug and play. This is for those people who want to do original research. It's not to discourage them, but actually to make them understand the kind of tapasya that is required. And why is that? That's not for my own praise or anything. That is basically to protect my time from many naive and enthusiastic and possibly sincere also folks in the Dharma tradition who wants to do research and they want to discuss something with me. But guess what? If you have not developed this, if you don't have a realistic understanding of what is involved, you are going to definitely waste my time. I don't know about yours, but definitely you're going to waste my time. Okay. That's why I just also spend time on this. Okay. What are we seeing here? On the left side, you are seeing the same plot that we saw on the previous page. And on the right side, so if the evidence exists, if the data exists, we have every reason to bring it. That is a Nyaya Darshana principle. Nyaya Darshana even takes it for granted that it doesn't even explicitly states it, but it is just a common sense. It is a part of Vijnana Buddhi that all the evidence should be considered. Otherwise, it's a cherry picking fallacy. Okay, and sometime I'll pull some videos where people do the cherry picking fallacy and they point the fingers at others, those who are taking the full data, and say, look, that's a cherry picking fallacy. Okay, we'll talk about that also, either in the Dr. No Shorts or this Shraddha and Prajna series. So what they did, you notice the difference between the two. They they pulled in, this is called data mining. They pulled in additional data that was available, okay, which they may not have looked at, and superimposed to see, is there a difference? And actually, it's a very impressive thing that additional lines that you see, this is a past data for the same region, they superimpose and it beautifully matches. So it's a very consistent picture, okay, against our prediction of 5525 BC. Now, remember, this is Netherlands, guys, not west coast of India. But therefore, I'm saying this particular phenomenon was such a massive, consistent global phenomenon that the footprints can be seen everywhere and anywhere around the world. Okay. Now, just like they added this to test the robustness of this their own data set, that is sensitivity analysis, we are going to do the other way also. In another episode, I gave a metaphor of DSC, differential scanning calorimetry. And those of you are aware, I have no intention of teaching everyone this differential scanning calorimetry. It's actually a beautiful, amazing, simple, yet extremely powerful method. Okay, but the only I want to take is a lesson. So sometimes you give an additional signal to see what it happens. Sometimes you remove something to see what it happens. Just like those people, those of you who are familiar with regression, think of a stepwise regression. Okay, so you take away certain data points and rerun. You take away certain variable and rerun and see what is the effect on the correlation and the regression equation. It is something like this, and we are going to do that. That is in effect sensitivity analysis. And by the way, you can see this applied, for example, in ancient India to comprehension, meaning to a statement. You have, I don't have it handy here, there is a beautiful sutra into Purvamimamsa. Okay, if you understand that sutra, that is the foundation for all we are talking here as a sensitivity analysis and a regression and a stepwise regression and so on. Okay, all right, let's go to, so remember, when I draw this line with 5525 BCE, that's my prediction, and against that I'm looking at the actual data to see, does it match, does it validate, does it corroborate? Here I am giving you the information, it does corroborate, it corroborates beautifully. How do I know that? Look at the slopes here, pretty vertical slopes, so that's a sudden sea level rise, and then at that 5525 or in that region, then it bends and it slows down. Okay, it continues to still go up, by the way. Okay, at least in this region. Here, right here in this particular area and a research in a paper, I'm going to show you how actually some of the data, when it comes from multiple sources, can kind of make the picture hazy. But if we, just like the differential scanning calorimetry, or short form DSC, as a metaphor, I showed you how you can use some additional treatments to refine your data, which can tell you much more than what this data set is showing you. I'm going to show you a demonstration of that. Okay, let's go there. Okay, so what is this data telling us? Remember, we predict. So based on 5561 BC plus 36 is the prediction, 5525 BC. So let me bring that prediction. So that's my prediction. Against that, I am looking at the actual empirical data from the current studies from this Wadden Sea area. Now, what they did, just like they pulled additional data that was available in the past, we call that data mining, because it's there, it's available for free. Why not consider it? Because it helps you understand if you are doing, if your data is right, are there any outliers? And if they are, just like a dosha, pravartana lakshana dosha, they tell us, and plotting is the best way, guys. Visual is the best way to analyze your data. And that tells us what to possibly look for, or what might be causing such a thing, and so on and so forth. Okay, do I need a land subsidence corrections, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what this has, just like I have my predictions for Krishna's Dwarka, its flooding and destruction 5525 BC. In this graph, what they're doing is against the actual data, that is what you're seeing here. And if you see those big bubble-like things, that those are confidence intervals on the data, standard error, and so on. What you see, these dotted lines or dotted line curves that you are seeing here are the actual predictions made by somebody else. For example, let's look at by Vink and others, made 2007. So that's what, about 15 years before this particular study. And what do you think? Now, if you say, oh, wow, this is so damn impressive, then you have a Vijnana Buddhi, then you understand what is happening here. On the other hand, if you say, well, but hold on, these predictions are kind of on the lower side, but the actual data is on the higher side, and it's not overlapping and it's not matching, guess what? I mean, that's a fact. If you say that, that's factually correct. But as far as a researcher, you are concerned, you are extremely naive. Okay, you don't know how modeling works. You don't know how actual data works, how a actual data is compared with a model, and how do we decide the efficacy of a model. Okay, you'll be treated as a naive person. You are. Don't wait for somebody else to tell you that. Okay, that's what it is. It's very impressive that the predictions based on some other means sea level curves made as 15 years before this research paper beautifully match. Okay, like you see the gap, I would say that's a right on the money. Again, if you have worked in engineering in general, or geology, I'm trying to think but chemical engineering, then you know what correlations are. Okay, again, I will not digress. Okay, so let's go further. This is another point I want to make. Depending on the type of data, depending on the source of data, okay, you can get variation. For example, this is such a beautiful graph, same region, everything same. The green dots with their error bars, those are standard error bars, you can say, are based on sea levels. Okay, so if you have to draw a curve, that is based on the sea levels. But exactly in the same region, the red dots you see, or red diamond you see, that dating or that is based on the local pit formation. What is pit formation? It's the like leaves and other organic matter that may get mixed with sand sometime, or by itself gets partially decomposed, and it forms like these semi composed, what do you say, semi decayed cakes, like that, which can turn into coal and crude oil and so on and so forth over a long period of time. So these pit formations in that marshy area, that happens. So when those that layers are taken and they are dated, you get certain dates. You try to correlate that with a certain time based on a calibration. Now, what this data is showing is, if you look at the sea level, it's giving you a certain curve. If you look at the data from based on the pit formation, it's giving you different dates. Just as a broad conclusion, I would say the based on pit formation, it tends to show that the things happen earlier in comparison to the pure sea level samples. The reason I'm using this data is again to show you that why, when you look at multiple researchers researching in the same area, same geographical area, looking at the even same parameters such as sea level, why you see the variation. Intrinsic variation, that's a common cause variation, or special cause variation such as land subsidence, but also the source of data. And then there could be a variation added, in terms of confidence interval due to the dating methods. Okay, are you using like AMS? Are you using some what do you call thermoluminescence? Are you using some other method, carbon dating? Well, carbon dating is AMS, but my point is some other method instead of carbon, some other isotope, and so on. That can have the effect. Quickly looking at this again, our prediction of 5525 BC. What do you see? I put that line at 5525 BC, and against that, now just imagine in your mind drawing a curve through those green dots, right on the money. That sudden sea level rise is happening right there at 5525 BC. Then it doesn't stop there, it continues. Now in this region, it appears like as if it continues forever until to this day. That is because based on, of course, the data, but the kind of data that was available in many other parts of the world, it appears, at least in their study, was not available, not the resolution possibly was not refined enough, not small enough to isolate the catastrophic rise events like 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that could be the reason. But you see, the pit formation data gives you dates earlier than the sea level rise. Okay, so that was one point I wanted to show you. Now, what are we doing here? Okay, we are looking at sharpening the data there, understanding the control limits. Again, the picture is easy to understand in this graph. This is what we mean by sensitivity analysis. Sometimes you take away the effect of certain aspects. So for example, here, maybe people removed the dating due to pit formation. Just stick to sea level rise, for example. Okay, mean sea level rise. And oh, what does it tell you? Yeah, beautiful. You can see the change of slope right there at 5525 BC, a sudden gush a vertical line, and now still vertical, still it is increasing, but the slope has changed. It has slowed down and so on. Okay. Yeah, this is another data. Oh, this is again interesting. So right within this is what we call subgrouping, right, in data analysis. They said, and this can be done. See, in genetics, we have this other nonsense created by dogma-driven geneticists, joining forces with Indologists, okay, who have created utter nonsense. And they have created something like ANS, if you know, or what is that? Am I saying it right? The ancient northern Indians, ANI, and AS, ancient southern Indians, ASI, or something like this. Now, what is that? See, by just pure common sense, common cause variation, the intrinsic variation, if you divide a line somewhere and one group above, one group below, you will find some difference, even a statistical difference sometime. I mean, guys, this gets digression, but I can tell you the stories. I used to, in my corporate days, I would sometime, we are doing the, what you call, community projects, okay? So huge project, millions of dollars funding for certain things. I'll not go into the details. Okay. And I was given the responsibility to show that that money is actually making a difference. Again, I'll not give you the details other than saying it was a community projects related to schools and people, the students learning better in terms of the STEM subjects like science and math and so on. And the use of some additional creative tools such as, say, music, and does the music help them understand math better, and so on and so forth. The point is, the data was interesting, but you couldn't really decisively say anything about it. But we have spent millions of dollars. And so now people say, well, show us that there is a benefit. And the leadership is kind of scared. And they say, Nilesh, need your help. And I said, so what does this say? I said, guys, this doesn't really say anything. It's all nice, but tell me what you want. Just like in another episode, I told you like how I can trick you, the like lies, damn lies, and statistics. So we have to be very careful, you have to, each one of us has to improve our ability, improve our intellect, improve our vijnana buddhi, improve our tarka mind, tarkic mind too, and bring them together, yantra, tantra yukti, and bring them together to understand this. So anyways, long story short, digression, I did what needed to be done to show that. And everyone is like praising me. No, they're like, fabulous. What a great analysis. Only I knew inside, I'm saying, my God, guys, all right, give me a break, but I'm glad you are happy. The reason I'm saying this here is this is how you do it. You can slice and dice the data in 10 different ways. Try to understand. This is not a manipulation exercise. Okay, so for example, here if you try to say draw the tangents, imagine a curve going through this, and I don't know if I did that. Yes, I did it. So draw the tangents through this. Okay, so that's like a very sharp sudden sea level rise. How do I know sharp? Based on the slope. Okay, and then the sea level continues to rise, but at a much lower level, so on, up to say 5,000 VP or so. And, then it continues to rise, but at a much slower rate. So what they did here is they separated the data, like look at those data points. They both have put it kind of together there, but if you, let me go back so you can see them better. Okay. So they said, is this a special cause variation, which is to say, if I separate the data from the Wadden Sea on the west side versus Wadden Sea on the east side, do I see the difference? The answer is they don't. Okay, so sometimes you do it to actually validate your conclusion. This is a sensitivity analysis, guys. Okay, and it's saying if there is no difference. So the data is consistent for that region, which is very important. Something more beautiful I'm going to show you. Okay, now again, that same data set that we looked at so far. Now, just imagine, so now before, what I showed so far, they added the data from different places. Then they separated the data west versus east, okay, within the Wadden Sea. They could have done it north Wadden Sea versus south Wadden Sea and see if they see a difference. This is how the analysis is done. And if you have to go and ask someone, so now what do I do? Actually, that happens in corporate world too. When I was in pricing, like, somebody who's working for me would come and say, now what do I do? Well, I mean, if I have to tell everything what you do next, then I might as well be doing it. And why do I need you? Okay. So if somebody wants to do another independent research and they're going to ask me every step of the way, then they're not ready for it. Okay, they're just not ready for it. So this the data on the left is what you see. Now in this case, what was done as a very ingenious thing that they did is they, from this mean sea level data set, okay, with a different height predicted and actual found heights for the sea level. In the second portion, that what I'm seeing, what I'm showing you, this is from this Wadden Sea, okay, just like they did Wadden West versus Wadden East. Here in this case, they kept all the Wadden Sea data, but removed the Western Netherlands. They say, well, just think of that as a Netherlands. Okay, what is the Eastern Netherlands? It's landlocked, but the Western Netherlands is basically the seashore facing Wadden Sea, right? So they removed the Netherlands data. Why? Because Netherlands is tricky. The name itself tells you, like Netherlands, the land below. Actually, as many of you would know, that the many places in Netherlands are actually below the sea level. Those of you who have flown, flown to the Amsterdam airport, like Schiphol airport, I don't know if you are as curious as me. I'm very curious about geography, geology, and all of that. So when it lands, if there is a information available, I'll say, let me see what's the altitude. Okay. And the Schiphol airport, if you see, the altitude is like a -3 feet or -3 meters or whatever it is. So actually, it's below the sea level. Okay, but of course there are other places which are up, and therefore the water is not there. Okay, so that's why the name Netherlands, which also means from the land subsidence point of view, it is a very sensitive and very active area. Okay, and therefore these researchers, kudos to them, they removed the Western Netherlands data points and just left rest of the Wadden Sea area from other area, Germany and wherever. Or other places wherever you can measure the mean sea levels in historical times. And look what they found. So essentially, they have taken the data on the left side, and when that treatment was applied, removal, elimination or removal, separation, not throwing away, separation of the data from the Netherlands side, look what they found. This is what I was trying to give the analogy of the DSC, differential scanning calorimetry. Okay, so sometime when you remove the extraneous effects, the effect that you are trying to study actually becomes more refined and prominent. And that's what has happened here. You must have noticed it. Now look at this. Okay, in the previous graphs, it seems like the water is always rising. It may be rising at a different rate, but it's always rising. Well, if you remove the specific data set, remove the effect of Netherlands, Western Netherlands, Netherlands, okay, along the shorelines, what do you see? In that picture, the significant pulse, which was not so clear in all the graphs we looked at today, but a significant pulse, okay, after actually, if you notice that, see, this is water level rising, sea waters, but here actually water level going down. Okay, do you know what that is? That is the effect of the younger Dryas, by the way. Okay, going down, and that this could be in a metaphorical sense or otherwise, maybe connected with, if you have heard the story, I don't know the source of that story, definitely not in Mahabharata, but I wonder if it is in Purana somewhere, that Krishna, Kushasthali existed for 30,000 plus years as the original place of Dwarka, from the time of a Manu and Revata, and I'm not getting all the names now, Anartha, Revata, and so on. But even close to Krishna's time, and this could be simply metaphorical, like that through that story, our great sages tried to preserve this geological, climatological phenomenon, okay, in the cultural memory. But we have, if you have heard this, that Krishna, when he came from Mathura, with all the Yaduvamshi, he asked the sea for land. And in his responding to his request, Krishna's request, sea actually retreated. I don't know if you have heard this story, but if you have, and you can see this now that you have this in the back of your mind, every time you see all the talks, you may go and listen to these same talks on Krishna's Dwarka again, and you will see many times, not always, but you will see that retreating of a sea. Okay, so now the sea level is coming up, but if you go back, and it was also up, but at some point actually here, just like around say 8,000 BC, which is about 6,000 years around that, the sea actually retreated. And that memory, cultural memory, that's an actual factual memory, is captured in the cultural memory of a Hindu civilization. Just like Agastya drinking the ocean. I will not digress on that, but that is also a geographical, oceanography, climatology memory that is captured in a Hindu civilization through this metaphor of Agastya drinking the ocean. Okay, but back to this. In this case, Krishna asking for the land. Now, somebody will say, again, the naivety may come in picture. So if you go back to 6,000 BC and somebody says, but Krishna was not there to ask for the land, then you miss the whole damn point. Okay, that is like a metaphor is meant for a certain purpose. If you take it literally, you are always going to go on a wrong track. But I just showed it to you here because I did see it. My point is, again, if you're lucky and if you successfully could remove the extraneous data points, it can actually bring a more refined view of what you are looking for. That has happened here. It's a miracle, guys. Okay, it happens often in science when you do it, and when you do it right, and when you play with permutation combinations, trial and error. Okay, so what has happened suddenly, that's catastrophic rise event 3 that we saw everywhere around the world, okay, West Indies and so on, but also Great Barrier Reef and the Gulf of Tonkin, the Dwarka itself, the Pumpuhar, Aceh Banda, all of this is also showing up in this record of Wadden Sea. How fascinating, how impressive. And then what happens? Actually, after this 5525 BC, a sudden sea level rise, the water continued to rise, which is also, we have seen it everywhere, practically everywhere. Dwarka, Pumpuhar, Aceh Banda, Tonkin, that Red River, what is this place? Great Barrier Reef. I will stop taking these names. Practically everywhere, guys. Okay, so water level continue to rise. And how far is rising? For example, until 6,000 BP. Does that ring a bell? Does that give you a deja vu? I said note down 6,000 BP. As much as you're going to note down, so that is 6,000 BP is 4,000 BC. As much as I want you to note down 5525 BC, I also want you to note down 4,000 BC. That is the time the water has gone up, and after that it is just staying there or eventually coming down. In fact, in this the paper, they do not have a data for the last 3,000 years. Okay, but if they had, actually it will show water coming down, to the today's mean sea level. Okay, all right, they have not shown the data for whatever reason. But now you see how this data is of course showing this sudden pulse, CRE, catastrophic rise event 3. But when the local Netherlands data was removed, especially because of possibly, I have to read the paper again, but the sensitivity to land subsidence, the actual data point that we are interested in, 5525 BC, emerges beautifully. Okay, all right. So that's it, guys. We have these locations. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. To this, we are going to add the 12th location today, the Wadden Sea. Okay, consistent evidence around the world for 5525 BC, the predicted year for flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka. Let's look at the summary. The Mahabharata war happened in 5561 BCE, 18 days from 16 October to 2nd November, based on the Julian calendar extrapolated in antiquity. Julian calendar did not exist before 45 BC or so, okay, the time of Julius Caesar. But we are using this, and why we are using this, that's another question people ask. Oh, but why not use Indian calendar? Which means you don't understand a damn thing. Okay, you have no clue about Indian calendar or this calendar. In order to understand Indian antiquity, we need a calendar that everyone is familiar, more or less, okay, as a calibration standard, but also that calendar that is solar calendar in nature and is stable. And either Gregorian calendar or Julian calendar does provide that basis. Now, India had a solar calendar. Okay, we have the solar months, and I have uh, brought them back through Bharat Dinadarshika and collaboration with the Date Panchang, the oldest family tradition of Panchanga makers in India. Okay, to whom many Panchanga makers around India do the consultation. So yes, it is there on the Twitter every day, updated at 5:30 in the morning, India time, Bharat Dinadarshika. But where is otherwise the existing purely solar Indian calendar? It doesn't exist. And that is the reason we use Julian calendar as a reference. Then only we can talk about these dates. Otherwise, I will only say what? About 7,500 years ago, on the day of a Kartika Amavasya, just before the first day of Margashirsha, Yuddha began. It went through the first 15 days of Margashirsha and the 2 days of the second half, the second Shukla, the Vadya Paksha. And you'll be more clueless. Okay, with this, you know exactly, you can count the days 5561 BC plus 2022, 7,583, and so on. Okay, now this is based on astronomy, but do we stop there? No, multidisciplinary scientific evidence. Guys, I get tired of this evidence. I mean, we shouldn't. We should feel so thankful and lucky and fortunate and happy. But the evidence is so much. Okay. And people say, where is the evidence? Where is the archaeology evidence? Well, if you have a bankrupt mind, you will not able to see, even if somebody presents the evidence. If you don't know how Bhagwan looks, Bhagwan appears, okay? And even if Bhagwan gives you a darshan, if you don't know what to look for, even when Bhagwan gives a darshan, you will not able to see it. That is the problem with folks who ask, where is the archaeology evidence? Where is the multidisciplinary evidence? Where is the geology evidence? Multidisciplinary evidence: archaeology, geology, hydrology, genetics, anthropology, climatology, paleontology, onomatology. This is the naming, okay? The names have the Sanskrit basis. They are that old names, and they existed 7,000 years ago, 14,000 years ago, 22,000 years ago. Just that onomatology is not even like a hard science, but that also just totally dismisses and destroys the utter nonsense of this Aryan invasion and that stupidity. Okay, same thing with linguistics. I'll not go there because, many people who don't understand science, they just get riled up with the linguistics. Okay, oceanography, sedimentology, and genealogy. Now, genealogy is not a hard science evidence, but even the genealogy evidence that we have from some of the royal traditions of today, but the evidence that is captured in Puranas, the evidence that is captured by travelers, the visitors to India, such as Greek visitors, the evidence that is captured in some form in Ramayana and Mahabharata, that is also validating these dates. Okay, it validates, corroborates 5561 BC, but more important, only 5561 BC. Krishna's Dwarka. Okay, now remember that 5561 BC is where we began, and make that correction of 36 years, because that's what Mahabharata says, that Krishna's Dwarka was gone 36 years after the Mahabharata war, so 5561 BCE, and making correction of 36 years. That's how we predict 5525 BCE. And then against that prediction, we look at archaeology evidence around the world. Okay, and it's very impressive. Enormous archaeology evidence from around the world corroborates this most important historical event of 6th millennium BCE. But is this most important historical event for Indians? Well, the answer is not. If you look at a recorded history, you go beyond 2,000 years, you go max beyond 4,000 years, anywhere around the world except India, you are not going to find anything. Now, it would have existed in the Mayan records. It would have existed in the Inca records, whatever they had. They had a very nice, ingenious system of recording it. I'll not go there. But these books were burnt by fanatic Christians, when they arrived in Mexico, when they arrived in Latin America, the further South America. They burnt a lot in India too. I mean, maybe not Christian fanatics, but the Muslim fanatics, right? They burnt like Takshashila and Nalanda and so on. And still whatever has survived is so rich. And there are many manuscripts simply collecting dust in many of the places in India. Okay, and then people say, where is the evidence? Is there any subject? Can you suggest me a subject I can research on? Guys, hundreds of lifetimes are not enough if you want to truly research. So don't give just a pep talk, don't waste my time, don't waste your time. Okay, do something that is suitable to your varnashrama, chaturvarnyam maya srishtam guna karma vibhagasha. Okay, that ikigai, something that you love to do, something that the dharma needs, and something that you are good at, and through something that you can find your sustenance. Well, I have not been successful in finding sustenance through what I research in the Dharma civilization. So I do other roles, I have to. But I do in such a way that I have reduced my requirements. I mean, if you see sometime what I wear, some of the t-shirts, I have them for 25 years, some of the jackets and all that for 25 years. I say, it's like, again, another digression, but Henry David Thoreau's Walden, if you have read that. I read that a long time ago when I was very young. And right or wrong, but it influenced me. Okay. Now, of course, Krishna is talking about that too. Vivikta Chira Vasanam in Uddhav Gita, in Bhagavad Puran, or Aniketam, in both Bhagavad Puran, but also also Mahabharata, and therefore Bhagavad Gita, you see that, okay? The person is not attached to these things. But this is not so much about the attachment. And I'm saying that's where the Henry David Thoreau's Walden came to my rescue. And he said, he writes the purpose, not exactly in those words, the purpose of the clothes is to protect you from the cold and the heat. Okay, that's the purpose, and not the aesthetics. I mean, that's what he says. Now, many of you will not agree, and I said that's what I'm going to do. Okay, the clothes, what they mean to me is to protect me from the cold, protect me from the heat, and protect me from, let's say, the nudity. So that's it. That's what I'm going to do. So I definitely minimize my requirements. That's what I continue to work on. But the Ikigai diagram, my fourth point was, so what you love to do, what the dharma needs, what the society needs, what the humanity needs, what the universe needs, what you are good at, and then finding a sustainable means through these three to sustain yourself. Okay. And see, if you are in a other space, like non-dharma space, then actually you can, I mean, I'm very confident I'll find very easy means to make myself rich. That has not happened in the dharma space, and in some sense it should not happen, but sustenance would be nice. And I don't mean for myself, but those people who want to come into this space. Why I'm discussing this again on the sidelines of this, because many people also ask me that question and waste my time. Many people are under the extremely naive, extremely foolish impression that because I spend so much time on this, they think this must be making money for me. No, this sucks away money from me. Okay, I spend money on this. Even there are a few very good genuine contributors, and they contribute to this. Even that money gets completely spent, okay, on different things that I do. So this is a challenge that we have right now, how to find a sustainable way through what research we do. I do not know a short-term solution. Again, I'm saying this because many people ask me one-on-one on email, and I have no ability to respond to those. Please, based on whatever you have studied, if you have studied accountancy, if you have studied engineering, if you have studied business, medicine, whatever it is, be very good at it. Then find a role, decide, you want that corporate ambition or you want to do this, okay? This doesn't have to be either or, but what I've found is right now it turns out to be like that. So if you have a corporate ambition, do that. Decide age. Like some of the people I do counseling, I say, well, decide up to 45, you'll do this and stop. Like, dead stop, like earn every single penny, don't spend any. Make sure your rest of the life is sustainable so that you can do whatever you want to do. Okay, I didn't necessarily succeeded in that, I would say, but yoga kshemam vahamyam, the life goes on. My point is, this is not sustainable right now. So do not have these very naive ideas that, oh, okay, so you're going to, like some people think like, hey, they can do, they can be my research assistant and I would able to pay them. No, I will not able to pay them. Okay, it's very clear. I'm just taking this opportunity to respond to frequently asked questions. Okay. So anyways, enormous archaeology evidence from around the world. And the point I was saying was, is this historical event most important of the 6th millennium BC for India? No, this is the most important historical event that just happened to have happened in 6th millennium BC for the entire history of humanity. And why? That's where I was telling something and I digress, that if you go back beyond, say, 2000 years, max 4000 years around the world, there are no other place which has got historical records that go beyond that 4000 year time period. And that's why this is very important. So this is not just all about Hinduism, Hindutva, or Hindus and Indians. No, this is important for the whole world. Okay. And so it's a duty. Don't say, Nilesh, just give another lecture. It is a duty of each one of you to understand this, comprehend it, internalize it, and in your own way, Swadharma, explain it to your children, explain it to your parents. If you're a children, I mean, you are in that younger group, don't think your parents necessarily know. Okay. They are too busy watching TV, the Bollywood, and then now the OTT serials. Okay. So learn this. And many young people are doing it. I just posted recently one video. He wrote to me. I had not known about him, but he's just taking small clips and explaining in the way that a crowd from his age group understands. Okay, so kudos to him. I think his name is Vansh Agarwal. Okay, you can check his YouTube channel. I don't know what the name of the channel is, but Vansh Agarwal. All right. So important point is, no other historical world event provides such impressive empirical and scientific evidence. The point is, you may have archaeology evidence going beyond 4000 years. You may have multidisciplinary scientific evidence about the climate, about the ocean levels, about some archaeology objects, just name it. Okay. You don't know what to make of them. You don't know who to connect with, because the Shruti and Aitiya that Krishna refers to in his discussion with Uddhava, Shruti Pratyaksham Aitiyam Anumanam Chatushtayam. So when you find some archaeology evidence, okay, so that's like a Pratyaksha. And if you can date it, then you can do some Anumana. Okay, the date itself is Anumana. But now you are trying to guess, purely guess, like, oh, who might have used it? Because you don't have the world does not have the historical text. Only India, by luck, by the blessings of Bhagwan, whichever way you want to say it, India has this. Therefore, this historical event and the enormous data that we have, the impressive corroboration through empirical data, scientific evidence, is of a historical importance. And the event is not of importance only to Indians, only to Hindus, but to the whole world. Okay, all right. With that, I'll stop. I'll see you shortly in another episode of Shraddha and Pradnya, or another episode of Dr. No Shorts. Namaskar.